My name is David Pluviose, and welcome to In the Margins. Today, I am thrilled to have as our guest Nolvia Delgado. She is Executive Director of the Kaplan Educational Foundation. I had the great privilege of interviewing her years ago, about 4.5 years ago, if I'm not mistaken, when she first took the leadership at Kaplan, and she is back with us as our special guest for today. Nolvia, welcome to In the Margins. Thanks so much for being with me.
Thank you, David, for inviting me back. It's great to be here. And I remember that first interview was like, I feel like it was my first day on the job. It was very recent, early on in my first month. So it's great to be back here a few years later.
Fantastic, fantastic. Yeah, I'm excited about the conversation that we're about to have. Of course, these last 4+ years have been very eventful when it comes to public policy, when it comes to higher ed access. So much has happened in the world of higher ed, not the least of which um, some would say an assault on our elite institutions. And of course, I know your foundation works very hard to get its scholars transferred to some of our leading institutions. And so there's quite a lot to talk about as we get going. But I'd like to first of all ask if you can refresh our audience. Talk to our audience, please, Novia, about your journey, your personal journey through higher education, and how has that informed the work that you're doing today?
I started my journey in higher education at Borough of Manhattan Community College, and their motto is start here and go anywhere. From there, with the support of the Kaplan Educational Foundation, I transferred to Smith College in Western Massachusetts, where I earned my bachelor's. Um, when I think of BMCC, Borough of Manhattan Community College, and this notion that you can start there and go anywhere, sitting in this seat, I'm a firm believer that it's true, and a big fan of both my community college and my 4-year institution. And I'm very appreciative of my journey.
No, that sounds good. And when it comes to the scholars that you currently are serving, are supporting at Kaplan, I'm actually interested in, as you speak to them about their hopes, dreams, fears, about not only, of course, finishing and transferring. I was wondering, how does your own journey play into how you're supporting your own scholars?
That's such a great question. And I often find myself making decisions as a scholar first. I wear my scholar hat a lot, and I think about what I would have needed, what would have been helpful, and also remembering what it was like transitioning from community college to a 4-year institution. So that's my leadership style, and that's how I support the students. It's just remembering what it was like. And because of that, I'm able to have honest conversations with them about some of the challenges that they're facing. Um, and I think I'm able to better support them because I've been in their shoes.
Fantastic, fantastic. Now, of course, when we spoke, you were just coming on board with Kaplan, and I wanted to ask you what has been accomplished. You've had, of course, some time now to work within the foundation with your scholars on so many initiatives and projects. Can you talk about some of what has been accomplished and some of what has yet to be accomplished as you look at the goals you're set coming in to lead the foundation?
Early on, one of my goals was to change people's perception of community college. Oftentimes, people forget that community college is freshman and sophomore year. And I found myself fortunate enough to have conversations with stakeholders at major banks, major institutions, and change their perspective and educate them on community college, it being freshman and sophomore year. And some of them actually changed their requirements and started accepting community college students for some of their programs, which to me was a huge win. And in addition to that, one of the biggest issues that I find with high school students entering community college, having been one of those students, is that there's a big knowledge gap. Are piloting a program called the Community College Bridge Program, and that's for high school seniors who are in the spring semester who are entering community college in the fall. And the goal is to close that knowledge gap so that they understand what success looks like at community college, what are the transfer requirements. Something that breaks my heart is when I'm at an info session and a student who's graduating in a few weeks comes to me and wants to transfer and wants to do all these things, but oftentimes it's too late. So with the Community College Bridge Program, we'll be able to help close that gap for students. So I'm very excited about that. Another exciting initiative that we are launching is the Transfer Hub. So pre-COVID, we used to publish a book called Your Guide to College Transfer. And the goal of the book was to provide students with the information and resources that they needed to transfer, along with profiles to different schools. So the next evolution of that, the digital evolution, is a digital hub where students anywhere, if you're a student sitting in Idaho, attending community college, you can access the Transfer Hub and look at what options are available to you for transfer, connect with institutions. So that's in the planning phases, but something to look forward to.
And you talk about community college being freshman and sophomore year. And of course, as you know, not everybody views community college the same way, right? Many, of course, say, if I'm at Smith College, or I'm at Brown, or I'm at Chapel Hill, I can do freshman and sophomore year at those institutions. And those institutions, of course, a lot of them have their own bridge programs. They have a number of programs that are designed to help students that didn't come in fully prepared for college get fully prepared. So a lot of those institutions have their own um, programs to assist, to support disadvantaged freshmen and sophomores. So what do you tell people who say, hey, you're saying community college is freshman and sophomore year? Why not do freshman and sophomore year at Chapel Hill, Smith, or any of these other institutions that you support your students to transfer to?
That's a great question. And I think part of it is life happens, right? And for whatever reason, even if you're destined to go to Smith, I'm a strong believer that I was destined to be at Smith. It ended up being such a great fit for me. But if I think of my own journey and the circumstances around me applying to college, it wasn't the time, right? I think for some people, it's financial. They need to save money. They need to stay close to home. And it's also about what they need. Sometimes they need the flexibility of only being able to take one class or two classes. And I think community college presents an opportunity for students who, for whatever reason, may not be prepared to enter a four-year institution, whether it's financial, academic, personal. There is a place for them at community college, which might make it harder for them to succeed at a four-year institution, even if ultimately that's where they end up.
Oh, thanks so much. Thanks so much. Yeah, and as we talk about um, community colleges, it's very, very interesting, and I do want your reflections. Under this current, presidential administration, I think there's been an unprecedented challenging of elite four-year institutions. When it comes to grants and federal assistance, they've been challenged as never before. Of course, historically, the question has always been asked, is doing your first 2 years at an elite institution the best value for your money, right? Versus looking at the transfer option that you support. And so I was wondering if you could specifically get into the value proposition of a community college. Why is um, doing freshman and sophomore year at a community college valuable? And what do your scholars gain by going that route in particular, starting at the community college?
I just want to be clear that everyone's path is not the same, right? There are some students that go straight to a four-year institution, and that's totally fine. And then there are some students that go through community college, and that's where they start, and that's also fine. I think it really comes down to the individual and where they are in their lives, both personally and academically, and what they need in order to thrive. One of the things that our scholars earn from starting their academic higher education careers at a community college is exposure to different people, different perspectives. Um, I remember being at BMCC, and there were folks who were working in local government. There were folks who there was like a firefighter. There were folks who were coming into class with all different types of lived experiences, age ranges, and having people who just are able to provide so many different perspectives to conversations just enriched the conversations we were having in the classes, because you're not only learning the material, but then you're also learning from people's lived experiences. And that's part of, I think, the beauty of community college is that you have people who might not otherwise have been in the same room coming together and learning from one another. Um, in addition to, for people who have financial constraints, being able to have affordable classes and around a schedule that makes sense for them. If you're working full time, there's evening classes, there's weekend classes, there's a program and a class for everyone at a community college.
One of the things that's notable about the Kaplan Educational Foundation is the uh, completion rate of your scholars of a four-year degree. Of course, completion has been a major challenge, not only, of course, at community colleges in terms of students actually earning degree, credential. Completion has been a major focus, but of course, transferring, right? So many might come in and say, hey, I'm going to go do my 2 years, transfer and graduate, and the numbers don't look good in many cases in terms of the students who actually come in with the desire, the express desire to go in to a community college, transfer, and get a four-year degree. Those who actually make it, the numbers aren't great. But of course, Kaplan's numbers are much better than the overall numbers of students who go to community college with the intent to finish a four-year degree, but not actually get there. What is it about what you're doing at Kaplan that actually, specifically in your view, gets your scholars to completion of a bachelor's degree? What's the difference between what you're doing and what other programs are doing, or what students are facing without the type of support you offer?
You make such a good point, David. The numbers are heartbreaking. 80% of students enter community college with the goal of obtaining a bachelor's. Roughly 30% end up transferring. Ultimately, of that 80%, roughly around 14 earn a bachelor's degree. For us, the number is roughly over 90% transfer, over 90% earn a bachelor's degree. For us, I think part of our magic sauce is closing that knowledge gap and really working with the scholars so that they understand all the different steps that are required for them to transfer, and continuing to support them beyond graduation from their bachelor's. We stay with them until graduation, sorry, from their community college. We stay with them until they graduate from a bachelor's degree. I think the individualized support, the mentorship, and the guidance is one of the part of our secret sauce to making sure that our students are graduating. Something else that we do is we teach our scholars how to advocate for themselves. I think that there is it's a rigorous process to transfer. there are a lot of moving pieces. And if you don't know how to advocate for yourself, it can be easy for you to get lost or to drop the ball, fall between the cracks. Um, and we teach our scholars that they need to advocate for themselves and make sure that they have everything that they need from their institutions when they get there. That's also part of it. Another thing is fit. We focus a lot of time talking to our scholars about finding schools that are the right fit for them, um, which sometimes it means going further away from home, or it means considering a major that you wouldn't have otherwise considered. So it's having a lot of those conversations around what makes the most sense for the individual based on where they are in their lives.
And one thing I want to ask you is why the focus on elite for your institution? Because of course, um, when I look at your scholars, and of course, there's institutions that they are transferring to, they're some of the very best, or some of the most expensive for your options when it comes to colleges. And so I do want to ask the question, why the focus on some of the elite four-year institutions, which are also the most expensive to go to, versus maybe more cost-effective options to earn a bachelor's degree? And secondarily, what are the financial supports that you offer your scholars?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And I think when you look at the price tag at some of these schools where our scholars are going, you may be turned off. But what we find is that these schools often provide meet full need. So they're meeting full need, and our scholars are graduating with little to no debt. Um, and they're also transfer friendly. They have additional resources available to provide students in a way that some schools with smaller budgets don't. Um, and so that's partly why we focus on those schools. And we've had situation where we've had a student, um, get into a highly selective school and then also get into a state school, and the finances end up working in favor of the highly selective school because they just have more resources and are able to meet full need in a way that some of state institutions can't. Um, and then I know you had a second question.
Financial support, which you answered partially to say that some of these elite institutions actually meet full needs, so they have more resources. What other financial resources do you have, can you find to support your scholars as they do transfer?
Yeah, so a few things that we do is we also encourage our scholars to apply for a Jack and Cook. We support them with the Jack and Cook application since they're able to also provide financial support. At KEF, we do provide some financial support. So while scholars are in their community colleges, they do receive a small stipend. We also, once they transfer, we provide transportation for them to get back home 3 times a year. We have funding available for things like unpaid internship, emergency funding. One of the emergencies that we get the most often is broken glasses. So that's, and if you can't see, you can't read, you can't learn. So that is one of the ways that we support our scholars, and a very common way that we support our scholars financially. And then we have funding available for things like study abroad.
And I was wondering if you could talk about the new community college bridge program. And so, looking at this grant, I believe you received last year to support this new community college bridge program. I was wondering if you could talk about the value of starting in grade school, right? Starting in high school, with regards to this pipeline, because of course, your foundation is kind of the a critical juncture in a pipeline, right? Going from high school to the completion of a bachelor's degree. And I'm sure many of your scholars go even beyond that. So, what's the significance of this bridge program and actually taking your scholars through to completion of the four-year degree, which is your one of your intended goals. So talk about this bridge program and what's its potential to really boost your scholars.
Yeah, so I think there's definitely the potential for students who go through the bridge program to apply and be KLP scholars. But the way that I see the potential of this bridge program is I think every student who's graduating from a New York City, right now we're New York City based, and this is where we're piloting. We're piloting it with a few nonprofits and a few high schools, but I think ultimately the goal is just to reach as many students as possible who are, getting ready to graduate from high school, have already committed to attending community college. So we're not persuading anyone to attend community college instead of a 4-year. These are students that have already planned to attend the community college. And the goal is really to reach as many students as possible who are entering community college and to equip them with the tools, the resources, and the knowledge that they need to close that gap. So, of the 80% of students who are aspiring to earn a bachelor's, we don't have just 30% who are transferring, right? To me, this is how we help to close that gap is by equipping students with the tools that they need in order to make the right decisions when it comes to their time in community college, and that they can transfer to a 4-year institution and earn a bachelor's.
And you talk about this program being, of course, New York City based, New York being the place where this program was piloted. Of course, across the country, we talked about the numbers earlier, and there's been a lot of money, effort, time expended to try to increase completion rates, both completion of a community college credential and transfer and completion of a 4-year degree. But those efforts have been unsuccessful in many cases, as we've talked about. I was wondering if you talk about your model and how you see it can be perhaps replicated or lessons others in systems in California and Texas and all over as they are trying to put in the right interventions to bring their students to completion. What can others learn from what you are doing here in New York? And I was going to talk about that issue.
Yeah, I think to your point, it's a massive issue. It's a nationwide issue, and I would love to fill that gap for the entire nation. Um, but in the meantime, I think it's early awareness. I think it's having conversations with students before they step foot on the community college campus. I think what often happens is once students get there, they start making decisions. They start choosing majors and classes without knowing what that means, without knowing that some of those majors might be more difficult to transfer, without having all of the information that they need in order to successfully transfer. So I think the early awareness bit of it is going to be the game changer for the students in the bridge program. And I do hope that this becomes a national model that can be replicated, because I think the need is there, and I do believe that it's about information and equipping students with the right information. And what I'm hoping is then with the transfer hub to bridge the gap between the students and the 4-year institutions, right? So that they're able to engage with 4-year institutions, that they're able to also have the tools and the resources on a digital platform. So even if they're not able to participate in the bridge program, the information will still be available to them.
My last question is this. Is a question about the future. We talked about even as you look at the work you do in New York, perhaps it goes national. Perhaps you are able to expand. I was wondering if you could talk about goals for your future and the future of the KEF. Where would you like to see the Kaplan Educational Foundation go and grow as you look to the future and the landscape where, now more than ever before, we understand some sort of credential, some sort of degree certificate is just necessary when it comes to being competitive in this economy. Where do you see the KEF going as you look to the future?
That's a great question. And, my big dream for KEF is that we're able to close that gap, right? So if we're able to close that gap by a few points and just make it easier for more students to graduate from an associate's and transfer to a four-year institution and graduate with their bachelor's, then I think my mission would be complete. I would love to see that, in the near future, for every student across New York City public high schools that are entering community college to have access to the Bridge program. Um, and, down the line, my big dream is for the transfer hub to be something that's accessible to transfer students across the country.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Well, Novia, thank you so very much for joining us on In the Margins. It was fantastic to have caught up on the great work that you are doing. Thanks again for sharing with our audience your important perspective. Again, thank you very much.
Thank you, David. It was a pleasure.
All right, take care. All right, bye bye.